Hi guys. So hopefully you've watched the introduction and you have a fair idea of some of the components of what will be covered as we read and summarize the text. So this of course is the summary of the first section that we'll be studying. The first section only covers chapters 1 and 2 of Aristotle's first book. And here we come across a preliminary argument or an argument that tries to outline why Aristotle is going to explore how to live a good life, why he thinks it's important, those things. So, what are we going to achieve while we watch the summary? Well, we're going to summarize the arguments and contentions provided in the first chapters of the first book. And the goals are pretty similar. We're going to name, define, and interrelate key terms. And then we're going to outline Aristotle's rationale for his inquiry into the good life, as I mentioned before. And the last thing we're going to do is look at these two main terms here, the idea of aims or goals and the idea of political science in formulating his arguments. So how come these are very important concepts in the first two chapters? So we have an APK, and our APK will be to draw a picture of something you should aim for if you want to live a good life. So can you please score yourself in each of these success criteria, and then once you're done, could you pretty please, with a cherry on top, go ahead and draw a picture of something that you should actually try and achieve if you want to live a good life, and that'll get you ready for watching the summary video. Okay, so as I mentioned before, chapters 1 and 2 are the first section that we're going to cover, and what I'm doing right now closely aligns with the textbook because some of you would prefer to read the textbook as a way to introduce yourself to the text, and other people would prefer these summaries. So the first thing I've got to say is that the whole point of section 1 and 2 is to provide a rationale for his inquiry into the good. That's a little boy doing some inquiry, and of course here's a thumbs up to represent the good, right? And right at the very beginning of the book, he provides us with a very vague but broad answer. Well, actually, that's a tautology, a very vague, broad answer. So the first answer is that the good is that at which all things aim. So the good is what we're all aiming for, and most people will be reading that as a initial argument. They were going, what are you talking about? And of course, he realizes that his answer just doesn't cut it. It's not sufficient. So he's forced to elaborate a bit more. He said, I've made this really broad statement. Now I need to explain why I actually think that. And we'll see why in a minute. He pretty much acknowledges that in life, there are many things that we do that have different aims and different goals. Okay. And we can divide these aims or goals into two broad categories. You can have intrinsic goals, which finish at the end of themselves. So this is the final thing I want to be. Imagine if you said, I want to be happy. That would be a goal where you couldn't really imagine that you want to be happy to achieve anything else. It's almost like it's the end goal. It's something which has all of its essence within itself. So it's an intrinsic goal, okay? But we also have smaller things that we do which have instrumental goals. And these goals lead us towards a grander goal. So let's say you want to in life get a good education because that will help you become happy. Well, the goal of achieving an education is an instrumental goal that allows you to achieve that intrinsic goal, which is happiness. So take some notes, please. Alrighty. Now, when you look at Aristotle, what he prefers is the intrinsic goals. He wants to have a look at them. He thinks they're the most useful for his inquiry. So they were looking at goals that actually have no other aim. And he eventually comes to the conclusion when he tries to find out what these goals are that have no other aim. Well, he finds out that they all have one thing in common. In fact, they actually have one final aim. Like, for instance, the need to be happy, one has one final aim, and that is to achieve the good. So to achieving the good things in life, or achieving the good, is the final aim of anything that actually claims to be a intrinsic aim. Like, for instance, being happy is actually really about achieving the good. So yes, you could argue that that being happy is actually an instrumental aim, which allows you to achieve good. And I think you could safely say that that's what's being implied. But still, he still does think that there are aims that have their own kind of intrinsic selfness tied into them. But when you analyze them deeper, they all revolve around achieving the good in life. Okay? And once he points that out, he says, therefore, knowledge of what is good is what's going to allow you to make the right decisions and live a good life. So the whole point of his book is to inquire into how to live a good life. Well, sorry, his whole point of the book is to inquire into what is the nature of good, because if he does so, then he's going to allow people to make decisions to live a good life. Take a note. Of course, with philosophy, nothing's ever really simple. So he then asks the question, well, what field of inquiry should help us make the right decisions and pursue the good? And his answer is the first and the most important is what we call political science. Now, don't think of political science as the way that it's taught in universities these days. The best way to think about it really is it's deciding how society should be run and how society should work. And the reason why he believes it's very important is because, first of all, a study of political science allows us to pick which sciences are the most worthy. If you look at how society can be structured to allow people to achieve the good, and then we have a look at which, that's basically a question of political science, right? So I'll say that again, if we look at which science allows us to achieve the good, that is a question of political science, because it's also a question about which science should we study, and that becomes a question about how to govern society. Also, we need to pick the people who then go ahead and engage in those sciences. Again, that's how we coordinate and run society to achieve the good. Political science also is an umbrella term for many other sciences, which then allow us to achieve the good. So these are what we would call esteemed sciences, sciences that are worthy because they allow us to pursue good. Political science also allows us to determine what we can and can't do. And the main thing about political science, and probably the best thing about political science, according to him, is that its main aim is to secure the good for everyone in society. So it is an umbrella term that covers all the other sciences that allow us to achieve good, and that in turn gives it the main aim of achieving good for for all of society. Now that's pretty much it. So you should know that we've named and defined and interrelated key terms. We've outlined why he thought it was necessary to engage and inquire into what is the good life, what is the good, how to live the good life. Because basically, if you do that, it'll help you make the right decisions and live a good life. And therefore, he then goes along, and we know why we're talking about goals and aims. We talk about intrinsic versus instrumental aims all the time. And we also know why he believes political science is so important, because it covers all the other sciences and ways of thinking that allow us in turn to pursue the good for society, right? So there are some things you should be note taking, and you should really have a fair idea of what I spoke about. Cheers.